We want to say welcome to Focus on Liberia. This is Primetime Sunday. We want to welcome all of you across the globe, and to all our Muslim brothers and sisters, we say happy end of Ramadan. Happy Eid Mubarak.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And so I also want to join Mr. Jack to say happy and Mubarak to all our Muslim brothers and sisters across the globe. I'm Anthony Sie, co-hosting with Mr. Dennis Jai. You heard him. It's Primetime Sunday, as we call it here, Focus on Liberia. And this is a time we sit with fellow Liberians, sometimes experts on a particular subject, to look at the issues as we see it so that we can share our understanding with our fellow men to get a much deeper and broader understanding of the issues. That is why we are here, and we want to welcome you to Focus on Liberia to this very important broadcast. Our topic is the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on Africa, or in Africa, if you like. We all know the pandemic is affecting almost the entire globe, but our emphasis here is how is it affecting or impacting Africa. That is why we are here, and we have Dr. Duke here joining us as a panelist or guest in this discussion, and we also have Dr. DeShield also as a panelist or guest in this discussion. Gentlemen, we are happy to have you, but I'll turn it over to Mr. Jai to welcome you in a very special way. Mr. Jai.
Dr. Abdoulaye Dukule is a journalist, a politician, a writer, and also a professor. Dr. Duke, welcome to Focus on Liberia. We are discussing today post-COVID Africa. But before we even get to that, we want to lay the premise. Today, we say the impact of COVID-19 on Africa, and we're going to be looking at various sectors. Dr. Duke, once again, say welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Thank you. I'm pleased to be here.
Great. Also want to welcome Dr. Harven DeShield, that's a PhD and JD. He's both a lawyer and a biochemist. He's joining us to discuss post-COVID Africa. We're going to be laying the foundation today on the impact of COVID-19 on politics, on education, on health, the economy, and you name it. Dr. DeShield, once again, welcome to Focus on Liberia.
I'm glad to be with you. Thank you.
All right. So to get the ball rolling, we want to again welcome our guests from across the globe. We say, please do us a favor, hit that share button, invite somebody. We're going to open the phone line very, very early so we can make this very, very interactive and conversational as we discuss the impact of COVID-19. The reason we're doing this is normally after every big thing that is happening in the world, countries respond in various ways. I read a beautiful article from Dr. Duke, and in fact, this was what that sparked this discussion today. Dr. Duke, I want you to just introduce what is it that you said that make us to kick this off, and give us some insight about what led you to write that article and a brief summary of what you wrote about so we can get this rolling.
Thank you very much. My article was looking at the whole, just a second, give me 1 second. Let me get somebody to be quiet.
Okay.
Yeah, my article was about what, Africa, where was Africa going to stand after the COVID-19? What impact it will have on our politics, on African politics in the era, how would government react to it? And two, and what are the possible outcomes, or the effects on the crisis, on the governance process, and also on the economy, and on other things that that are going on. What is going on now, and how would that affect governance if things go bad? But I was looking at a very worst case scenario, possible case scenario. If we are going to go into a very big disaster, like an Ebola case situation, where governance become difficult and the government have to be going back to take laws, impose new laws to be able to control the population that is becoming more and more discontent. Either they can't go out, they don't have money, there's no food, so somehow society is going to have to face certain issues. And those issues are, what does it mean for Africa? Was Africa prepared for the COVID? Nobody was prepared for it, including the Chinese. But what does it mean for us? How can we develop a narrative in this situation? Narrative that is based on Africa's need, Africa's understanding of issues, and Africa's capacity to deal with the problems. And that was the basic, that was the discussion, was an article for discussion.
Thank you so much. And that was a very beautiful, beautiful article. Let me go to Dr. DeShield. Doc, first of all, how is it, and how is COVID-19 around where you are? You are in the biomedical, area. How is COVID-19 overall?
I think, overall, that's, people are doing the best to cope with it. There's a little bit of, I guess, relaxing of the rules, the very strict stay-at-home orders are sort of being relaxed a little bit. But personally, I think it's a bit of a sort of premature. I don't think we're completely out of the woods yet to be opening things up, as fast as people are. Me personally, I try to stay home as much as I can. If, whenever you can afford to, if you have the means to doing something like that, it makes sense. If I do go out, if I have to go out, I, go with a mask and that sort of stuff, just try to social distance and what have you. I don't think we're out of the woods necessarily. I think right now is primarily economics, that seems to be driving the driving force to get things going. And that seems to be the norm pretty much everywhere. And it's understandable, people have to make a living. So that's a fine balance between wanting to ensure safety of the public and people needing to earn a livelihood. Not everybody can, work from home. And, if you can imagine, I think, in Africa, that poses a serious challenge. Yeah. A lot more people there cannot work from home. And we're having the same issues are coming up in North America, right? Whether you're in Canada, I currently reside in Edmonton, Canada. I go back and forth to the US, used to live in Chicago for a while and still go back there for business. And the same pressures are there. The public officials are under immense pressure to open the society back up because people need to work. So it's a fine balance, and in some places they seem to be doing a better job at trying to balance the safety aspect of doing that than others. So I think it's going to come down to that. Some places, if the government have the means, they're going to have to figure out a way to subsidize certain, positions. For example, people that for example, if you have to go to, you don't own a refrigerator and you have to go and buy food on a daily basis, how do there's challenges like that. I think very unique challenges with regards to Africa that we have to deal with that's separate from what other people have to deal with. So much of that is based on having to go out daily to earn a living. So even if you have a curfew, it seems sort of arbitrary. It helps, but at the same time, I think in some societies, you have to concentrate more on the contact tracing aspect and that sort of stuff, diagnosing and testing contact tracing. More so the stay at home. It's hard for people to stay at home completely when they don't have a means to earn a living, right? So that's the issue.
Thank you. And we're going to get deep into that. Before we even go into it, we say again, welcome to Focus on Liberia. Let me get my co-host involved here. Mr. CA, you work in the airline industry. So how are the outlooks of things, the restrictions and all the things imposed by COVID-19? How are we looking now?
Well, things stay relatively slow or I can say things have been relatively slow to a degree we've never seen before. But as of the 15th of this month of May, we have seen a little bit of pick up with passengers and load in the airline industry. In my own airline that I work with, 2 months before the 15th of May, some planes will come, you have 2%, 3%, 15%, and 20% at most within that 2 months period. But as of this May 15, we have started seeing up to 60, 65, 70% on a plane. But the airlines are still pretty much running like 10% operation. So if an airline were having about 100 planes, they would just be running 10 of them. And it stayed the same. The only difference we see is that the passenger level is increasing gradually. My airline, Southwest, right now, our cancellation has reduced because we're having more cancellation on a daily basis. But right now, we're not having that many cancellation anymore. We're seeing a rise in the number of passengers that are coming. Being at the airport, involved with the day-to-day operation, I see more people now at the baggage claim area, at the gate area. And so I would say that, yeah, I think people are like, okay, this thing is not going away. We can't put our life on hold. So when you see people saying we should open the economy, I think that's what they are speaking to, and the people are responding to that.
All right. Again, now we can go into Africa. And Dr. Du, let's start with a basic assessment before we even talk about the impact of COVID. Right now, what is happening in Africa as regard COVID-19?
You know, if you look at what goes on, what has been the response globally, I could say Africa was better prepared, or maybe we have a better culture of hardship that helped us to face this thing. For so far, I think you were talking about 100,000, maybe. I think about 100,000 people caught the disease toward the continent. And that came in the last 2-3 weeks, really. I'll give you an example. I've been following the Manu River Union. For example, on April 8th, Cote d'Ivoire had 444 cases. Now they have 2,300 cases. On the same date, Guinea had 18. Now they have 580. And Liberia had 14 at the time. Now we're talking about 255. And that has been the same type of expansion throughout the continent. And the problem for Africa is, you know, as we talk about the economy, we're talking about flights and all of that, is the fact that people were able to, every country shut down completely. And that has probably helped. Maybe that's why, you know, people are trying to find out why Africa has not been affected by the virus like other countries. We have 1 billion, a population of 1 billion people. If you take up the Arab countries, the biggest numbers are in South Africa, Senegal, Kenya. And those are in the thousands. And Africa is also now getting to 3,000. But overall, Africa has done very well. I think the African governments were prepared. I think there was first the CDC meeting. There's a CDC Africa meeting in Addis Ababa. And the CDC, they don't have money, but they were very proactive. They wrote to all the ministers, held press conferences, reached out to every government. And by the 1st of March, many African governments had taken measures because they knew that if it happened as bad as it was happening in Europe, we'd be in very big trouble. But that doesn't mean we are not being affected now. Talking about Africa is, people talk about the GDP is going to lose about 3%. And you know how long it takes to get 1 point percentage in the GDP. So that you're talking about rolling back the economic progress we made in the last 30 years back to the days of 1980s when things were really bad. We're talking about people not being able to service their debt. So that's a situation. I think on the health side, it seems okay. And then you can look at, you know, there's another aspect we have to look at as we talk about this as Africans. malaria kills, according to UNICEF, World Health Organization, the malaria kills 10,000 persons a day. You're talking about 90% of those in Africa, 80%. And what medicine do we take in Africa? Chloroquine. Now that they're talking about introducing chloroquine in the West to fight coronavirus, suddenly is bad. So we have to think about those things before we jump into narratives and follow people. This is not our disease. It is bad, but it's not that bad. It's not killing 10,000 people a day like malaria that nobody cares about because it's killing mostly Africans. So there's a political side to these issues we have to look at.
All right. Before, let me put out some numbers here that there are some numbers before I go to my co-host. We see that if you can see that South Africa alone, this is from the UN report, reported COVID-19 cases in Africa as of May 18, 2020. We have South Africa with 15,515 and Egypt with 12,229. Those are the two highest. Morocco, 6,000, Ghana, 5,000, Guinea, 2,000, Nigeria, 5,000, almost 6,000, Cameroon, and the rest of it. So that's the picture of Africa today. And so we're going to go sector by sector and see what the impact have been. And let's start with the health sector as we go to Dr. DeShield, because the first thing I noticed is most of our drugs, and you are in the biomedical industry, most of the drugs are imported from abroad. So when there's a restriction on travel, what happens to Africa? So let's start with healthcare and see what the impact has been.
Well, you make a good point, which is it's the lack of capacity. It's about high time we prioritize those sort of things. Now, you have some of the same issues are faced within the U.S. Give an example, most of their active pharmaceutical ingredients come from China. Something like close to 60 to 90%. Same thing with the medical devices. A lot of those things is a different aspect of the problem. Their problem is not a lack of capacity. They're just you're sort of chasing after trying to maximize the shareholders' earnings by shifting things overseas. So they have they're in sort of the same sort of conundrum that they're faced with, the fact that they need these ventilators and what have you, and most of that is being made overseas. Same thing with the active pharmaceutical ingredients of the drugs. That applies to Africa as well. So we don't do enough manufacturing of active pharmaceutical ingredients, even though we're in 2020 by now. Those are things that we should prioritize. When you hear about, I'm sure you've heard about give an example, the herbicide, the herbal drink rather from Madagascar. So it's not an issue of using African ingenuity to come up with different drugs and what have you. But at the same time, you still have to put in place the mechanism to make sure that those therapeutics are safe and efficacious. Same way you would want to make sure a vaccine that comes from overseas, you heard about the uproar over that. Nobody wants to be used as a guinea pig, what have you. Well, you should apply that even if it comes from another African country. We need to have the same standards. These drugs, anytime you give someone a drug that's untested or that hasn't been used for that particular indication, you always have to do so with the uttermost care. Because if somebody dies, for example, from the herbal drink, lots of people start to die, then the government will be found to be negligent and reckless or whatever. So it's not a bad idea in 2021 for us to put in place mechanisms such as having in place clinical trial boards and what have you, review boards, so that we can conduct clinical trials ourselves instead of always relying on other people to test our drugs. For example, the World Health Organization, and I think the Germans have offered to test the herbal drink from Madagascar. Well, we shouldn't really have to go to Germany or rely on the WHO to do something like that. We should by now we should have the capacity to do that. Individuals get together and form biotech pharmaceutical companies. Certainly, countries could do the same thing. You know, if we have people studying chemistry at our universities, biology and what have you, pharmaceutical science, we need to subsidize that industry and build capacity so that we can do our own testing, so that we can develop our own active pharmaceutical ingredients. If the Indians and the Southeast Asians have done this about 15, 20 years ago, they were, you know, just as behind. Now they manufacture most of the active pharmaceutical ingredient comes between China and India. That's where most of it comes from. So there's no need to reinvent the wheel. People have already done this, and it's just a matter of prioritizing. If you prioritize that part of the economy, enable, you know, drug manufacturing, subsidize, do whatever you have to get that going, we would be testing all of our herbal medications to identify the active pharmaceutical ingredient. It's a tried and tested process. So you just have to be, it's a matter of prioritizing.
Dr. DeShield, my partner Dennis just showed a chart there showing the number of persons that contracted the viral across Africa. If you compare those numbers with that of the Western world, you will know that Africa is far less when it comes to the rate of infection.
Yeah. So let me cut you off. So I've read those articles, studied that a lot, as you can imagine. So the issue there, and that's true, and we're overjoyed about that. I mean, like the doc said, Dr. Duke, you know, we all knew that if this COVID-19 would have had the same sort of impact in Africa, the impact would have been worse if we hadn't taken the measures that we did. But at the same time, when you look at the data, they attribute that to the fact that I think it's 60% of the population demographics in Africa are under 25 or less, right? That helps a lot. In this particular COVID-19, that could be one of the factors. I'm not saying that's the only factor, but that certainly helps us because COVID-19 primarily, you know, if you have an immunocompromised system, so typically, not everybody, obviously we know of young people dying from it also, but it affects the elderly. The older the population, the more you have to worry about it. Africa happens to have one of the youngest population in the world, 60% under 25, right? There's some indications also that in hotter climates, it helps also. You know, I mean, you can take it with a grain of salt, but it certainly seems to help in that aspect. I don't want to take, at the same time, I think it's important that we do give credit to the governments, the African governments. For once, they did take this serious. Having gone through Ebola and all of that stuff, I think they were on the ball about this, and they did take it serious. But there's one thing that's a little bit disturbing in that data. So the rate is slower initially. It took, I think it took, what did I have it here? It took 11 days to go to, it took 52 days for us to get the first 10,000 infections in Africa.
Dr. DeShield, let me jump in here.
Yeah.
I don't want to believe that the infection rate in Africa, across Africa, is low because African leaders took it serious. I don't want to believe that. If you look at the Western world is the most traveled region in the world. People moving from all over. And because of the too much movement, especially air travel from China to America, so because of that much movement in the region of the world, the disease travel faster as compared to Africa. Africa, I can argue that may be the less traveled region of the world.
Well, I mean, I said it's a combination of factors. I don't think you can say, I'm not saying this can be attributed to anyone. I think it's a combination of factors, right? I don't think it's not just one particular thing. The demographics, the population demographics absolutely helps. 60% of the population is under 25. This is a disease that primarily impacts older population. I'm not saying completely, but that it definitely helps that we have a much younger population in Africa, 60%. In addition to that, I mean, we do have to give, we do criticize these governments when they don't take any measures, okay? All I'm simply saying is we do have to give them some credit. Having gone through Ebola and things like that, I think they did try to put in place the measures that they could, especially in some instances, the stay-at-home orders went in relatively early. And,
Thank you.
you know, it's not, is it a perfect response? No, but I wouldn't say that they were completely negligent either. They could have been completely negligent and ignored it. They didn't seem to do that.
All right, thank
It's
you.
important that we give credit, you know, when they took some steps.
Thank
Now,
you.
with regards to testing, we could do better in testing, right? We should be able, I mean, you have to test. We should be able, because a lot of places, we don't have enough things like ventilators. If people were to start getting, you know, needing ventilators, getting that sick to the point where they needed that would be a big issue. So we have to do things up front, which is testing, contract tracing, the stay-at-home orders whenever we can do it. You know, I'm simply saying that, you know, I'm not saying the response was 100%, you know, not without fault, but I think we have to give some credit to them.
Thank you.
The rate is going up, though. That's the second point I was trying to make, is that we shouldn't, you know, rest on our laurels. The rate is, it took 52 days to get to the first 10,000, but it only took 11 days to go from 30,000 to 50,000.
Thank you.
That's not good. So the rate seems to be getting faster. 20,000 in 11 days, 52,000 in 10 days. So the rate seemed to be, so we shouldn't, it would be sort of like misleading for us to now say, oh, you know, it's over and we can just relax. I think we still need to remain hyper vigilant as far as the measures that we can afford to take. You know, like the doc said, at the same time, we do have to balance this. People have to earn a living, so we still have to try to balance.
Thank you, Dr.
I just
DeShield.
think
Thank
it's
you.
important to give some credit when we do take, you know, some measures. We can criticize, but I think it's important to give some credit too.
Thank you. Thank you. I will take that one, that at least they were able to put in some measures. Thank you. Let's come to you, Dr. Duke.
Yeah.
You know, we know that most African countries' healthcare system is, their healthcare systems there are not sophisticated. And so to see that Africa is doing much better, looking at the infection rate, we can't say that it's because they have a better healthcare system. So if we take that out, what is it that's keeping the number low?
I think that Dr. DeShield was just mentioning some of the things that, hypotheses that people put forward, including the age of the population. The median age of Africa is 19.6. You know, if you add everything, we are 19.6. So we're very, and somebody has a joke about the COVID, say COVID is old and cold. Africa is young and, you know,
Warm, hot.
Young and hot. Africa young and hot.
Yeah.
So you can, so, but I think the two things you talked about, the climate, you know, because they say there's a likeness to flu virus. And the flu virus prosper mostly in cool temperature or something like that.
Right.
And that has an effect. And then there's the population. But then, you know, I want to come back to a point that Doug was making, which is that African government, for once, they were proactive. I mean, proactive in the context of they got the news late, January, February, they got the news. But by February, most African countries knew what to do. They knew what, you know, they had decided to lock down cities. I know, for example, Abuja and Lagos were completely shut off the rest of the country. In Ivory Coast, they shut down the capital city. Almost for 2 weeks, nobody could enter or leave Abidjan. So those measures were, because they knew what would happen if this was going to be like Ebola, and we get that in the cities, nobody would stop it. So I think the measures that they took were very good. And then the density of the population is also part of it.
Yeah.
Big urban centers are, you know, conveyors of, you know, anything you want. You know, you can go from one place to another one. okay, we are less mobile. You don't have airports that receive 5,000, 10,000 people every single day throughout the continent. Big airports are probably South Africa, Abuja, Lagos, it's something like that. That could be one. And then also something that works is the cross-country cooperation. I've been following these things, what people do across the borders, how they cooperate, set up check-in centers at some borders, or making sure that people who come in are or sent to different places to be checked. So there was a lot of work at the borders. And I think after the Ebola in Liberia we didn't do much with it, but we have a National Institute of Health, although the money is not there to make it very functional. The CDC budget in Addis Ababa is $10 million. Can you imagine? What can you do with $10 million to cover a continent? So these are the things, the priority, but I think we are lucky. Also, it teaches a lesson, something we learned. For the first time, no government official was able to fly out of Africa to go do medical checkup or send it. Yeah. So medical tourism has been, everybody's sick. You got malaria, you stay in Abidjan. You got malaria, you stay in Conakry. You don't go to Paris you don't go to New York to get you physical. So that will probably prompt the governments to say, someday this is going to happen in a different way. We may not be able to go anywhere. And I hope that from this one, we'll learn that, listen, you cannot say, I care about health when you give 0.05% of your budget to health structure. That don't work. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. So, but if you put money in health, you're talking about education. But education also, but you're also talking about entrepreneurship. We have to look at these things as money-making thing. That money is not just gold and diamond and oil. That service, health is big money. But people don't see it that way. People who have money don't see it that way. There's no cooperation between states to create. ECOWAS has something, but they don't have money. They have the Wahoo that was set up for the Ebola crisis. Just like CDC never worked until Ebola happened. But nobody has money in Africa, and that's the biggest problem. How do we pay for these things?
So Dad.
Yeah, how do you make sure that you have the resources locally? When the US say we're going to give you $1,200 to everybody, they're taking from the US. It's US borrowing from US. It's like, drum palm wine, palm oil on, But when we say we give it $500 to every Liberian, we got to borrow that money from the World Bank or from France or somebody. So it's not the same thing. So we have to change those things.
Thank you, Doug. Let me welcome our West African correspondent, Mr. Edward Amara, who's joining us from Freetown. Edward, welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Thank you very much. Good evening over there. I'm happy seeing you again for quite a long time.
Right.
How are you guys doing?
Good. And we are discussing the impact of COVID-19 on Africa, and you are right there in Freetown. Tell us what's the impact has been across Africa.
Well, thank you very much. COVID-19 is a global pandemic, and unfortunately, it met Africa in a very vulnerable situation. Africa is a continent that is being run on donor-driven budgets. Having said that, it has actually taken a deep toll on African economy. You try to observe a lot of things that are happening today. Like when COVID-19 came in, all where Africa national government used to live independently, like in time of the Ministry of Aviation, we talk about Ministry of Aviation as Transport. They even watch at international trading. They even watch at the local trading that they used to do within themselves. And even when it comes to their official working, all of these things have just been halted, down to their educational institution have been halted. So all of this area where our government used to get their resources to at least, though the government of Africa, most of what they do, they depend on funding, taking loan. That is why most government in Africa today are indebted. Unfortunately, even the national sources today, they are no longer coming in. So the COVID-19 has taken a deep toll on Africa. It has exposed the weak system of our economy. Let's take a common example, like places like Nigeria. You know, Nigeria, they are absolutely dependent. Okay, the main backbone of Nigeria economy is the oil. Unfortunately, because of the COVID-19, all of that system have been halted, though they may be still getting economy or money out of the oil that they are doing, but it is not as usual. You could take places like Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone, though, when this government took over, they decided to put a halt to most of the illegal diamond trading that was actually in this country. But the government had decided to ensure that they re-establish it so that they can have control over this system. Unfortunately, the COVID-19 came in, and most of all of this development have just come to a standstill. So the economy of Africa is definitely bound to suffer a permanent damage before ever COVID-19 can leave. And if you can observe, we do not have that kind of strong economy to even tell the citizen to go under complete lockdown like what is happening today in Europe for 21 or even days more than that. Most people in Africa today are living on their daily bread. What they get on a daily basis, some of them go and hustle at the end of the day. They must ensure that they survive on these things. All of these things have just come to a standstill. And the government per se, they are finding it very difficult how they can manage to swim within this system. At the end of the day, you may see when the COVID-19 will be living in Africa, we are bound to go into bad debt because what we have even managed to keep into our central bank, most of these things are going to be taken away and be utilized on the COVID-19. In Sierra Leone, if we have a 3 days lockdown at the end of every month, you must see this government trying to take money around 250,000. That could be changing to US dollars around $25 or $27. They will have to change it and distribute it to each and every vulnerable people, and they do not have any other money to take. Rather, they depend on the national economy. All of these things are coming. So we are bound to see most of our government, just after the COVID-19, China, America, and other countries will be coming into Africa to ensure that they give us bad debt. Even when we depend on UN and other international body to give us money. How much money are we going to receive from them? The money that will be coming, it may contribute to the economic development of Africa, and infinitesimal, it will be something that will be too little to be accounted for. Reason being, most of those guys, when they send money into Africa, they send their expert there to come and work. And if they are coming to work, most of those money are definitely going to be paid into this expert budget. So the little natural resources that we have managed to save, we may be forced to go into making contract with the Chinese, America, whatsoever. So definitely Africa economy is bound to suffer a huge damage, and it's already suffered a setback. That is why most demonstrators, certain countries like in Guinea, a few days ago, there was a reprisal there because you can stop the people not to go out. That is fantastic, granted, because it is for the well-being of them. But at the end of the day, they do not have anything to survive on. So the layman must come out to ensure that they struggle. So there was confrontation, and we're bound to seeing that. So definitely there's a huge setback into African economy, and we're finding it very difficult how to survive within this particular COVID-19 onslaught in Africa.
Thank you, Amara, and you went straight into the economy, and that is good. One thing I wanted to say about health is most of the things that we know today in the West has preventive measures like the hand washing. So I was looking at the statistics that in Africa, people with basic, soap and water, running water, we have 34% of the entire continent that have access to the basic soap and water to wash hands, running water. Yeah, 36% have no facility, and 30% with little. So with all these kind of challenges, as I think of all the things that we have listed as the reason of the slow infection rate, one maybe just we are lucky.
Yeah, we are lucky. We are lucky in one or two ways because up to now, I think yesterday we have about 100,000 infection rate into Africa. Most of the death cases are coming from South Africa. Granted, and the WHO scientists are saying that Africa may not suffer. They are expecting that within 1 year, about 250 million of people in Africa are going to be infected by the virus. But most of us may survive it because we are young. That is granted. And most of those, the prevention measures that they have given us in terms of washing hands with water, so and whatsoever thing chlorine. Water, we have a lot of water resources in Africa. Unfortunately, most of these cities, like where I'm staying and other places, though we have the natural water resources around us, but we can't get access to it. The water itself that we may want to make use of them, they are definitely contaminated. You may see that Africa is surrounded by water resources, but unfortunately, we do not have the means to utilize this water properly. So all of these preventive measures, there are certain people, in fact, they don't believe it because they compare the rate to Africa and the rate with the Western world. They may say that, why is it that people are dying in Europe on a daily basis, 1,000, 2,000, and this same government is claiming that there is COVID-19, there are coronavirus into our country, and they're only reporting 10 or 15 days. It is possible that it is a normal death. So these are some of the things that we are definitely, they are trying to compare the statistics in Europe to that of Africa, not knowing that in Africa, our demography is constructed with very young population. And the COVID-19, being young is not actually an antibody against the COVID-19. However, it gives you the opportunity.
We can't depend on that. Let's go to education. Dr. Duke, I want to start with you. We talk about health briefly. I know we have so much impact and so many things to cover, but let's look at education. Schools are closed, and what do you think the impact is going to be?
Well, this is where they say crisis always has a way to open opportunities. And we've been toying with, social media. We've been playing with communication, internet and all of that. But now is the real time, is a time when we really, really need to use it. But how do you teach classes when people don't have electricity? They don't have computers. I mean, you can't teach remote computer. You can't do it on your own.
Yeah.
You can't sit in the Capitol city and be yelling and say, I'm teaching a lesson. And then how do you do that? People don't have computers, they don't have, so all of these things, they're all linked. Education and health are linked. All our universities by this point, after 60 years of independence, this is where you can criticize our government for not emphasizing education. All our universities are supposed to be able to do these things by now, supposed to be prepared for this. Not only for this, education in terms of being able to do education remotely, but also that the University of Conakry and the University of Abuja should have been able to work on something. What is Ebola? Where does it come from? Nobody, after Ebola, Monetary Union stopped. We stopped thinking about it. Liberia has a health center, but it's part of education, but we don't have a medical school that could furnish people, could produce people to go work into that center. So people have to come here, learn a narrative and go back and work in that center. And then usually they get grants for 1,000, 2,000 to do paperwork, but they don't really have money to do anything. So education is going to suffer. In terms of time, you can say, yeah, you lose 1 year, but that's not the problem. The weaknesses we see in the health system, total dilapidated, is the same in the classroom. So that's a problem. You can't, it's a continuum. Education, health, economy is all in one basket. And Africa still has the problem to define its own narrative in all of this. If you don't have your own narrative, you fall for everybody's story every day. You will never have your own story. That's the problem. Today somebody was talking about the Cold War. We're talking about education. This is also part of the Cold War. A senator, US senator, was talking about we are in a Cold War with China. So my question is, where is Africa going to go? Is Africa going to have its own narrative, its own story about this Cold War that is coming? Because it's going to be about the US campaign, is going to be about what China did, what China didn't do, and who can be tougher than China. That means the world is going to be divided. And what is the interest of Africa when you talk about education? We have to educate ourselves about all of these things, how they affect us, how they affect us as a continent, as part of the global community, and also just—
Dr. Do.
Yeah.
I like the, I will call it revelation or the description that you use. It opened my eyes broader, looking at the challenges our education system, all across Africa, are facing. We're talking about Liberia as a case. Now, people can't go to school because of this pandemic. You talk about no electricity, you talk about no computers, and then internet. Even if individuals didn't have these things in their homes, if the educational institutions had them, say, okay, you can still go to class, and maybe we can reduce the number of persons and space the students out 6 feet apart, because we have the facility at the school. There's internet at the school, there's a projector there, the teacher can still make a presentation. But we don't have that. You think this message that has been revealed as a result of this pandemic will make African leaders to see clearer and say, look, we are behind here in technology, and so we have to do something about it? You think they're going to get that?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think, technology, we see technology as something that belongs to somebody. It doesn't belong to anyone. Once it's invented, just like the virus, it doesn't belong to anyone. Once it's out there, we need to take it and use it for our economy, because it's always about the economy. No matter how you look at it, education, health, you're talking about the economy. If you don't have healthy people, you don't have an economy. If you don't have an educational system, you don't have people who can run an economy. And that's our problem today. We see it today in Liberia.
And Dr. Duke, you said earlier, let me jump in again, that you gave an example about Ebola. Yeah. We had Ebola in the Maroon Union, and you said that after that disease, you were hoping that the South region was going to do something about it to investigate and see how they can prevent it. And you also disclosed that nothing like that happened. And so for you to be telling me that you believe that there was something will be done about this lack of technological tools in terms of education, I don't believe it. It will be the same African mentality. Okay, it's over now. It may not come back again.
Yeah, the situation of Mano River Union with the Ebola was really disappointing. In fact, I worked with a group, and then a year ago, we tried to put a symposium together to bring Mano River Union and ECOWAS to talk about lessons learned from Ebola. We could never get the money. Everybody went, we don't work with non-state actors. They say, it's a good idea, but we say, okay, can you just do it? And then we participate. We couldn't get nobody, not a single person to sit and talk about what happened to us during malaria. Where did we get it from? How did it develop? What was its damages? How can we prevent it from happening? What are the resources that we need to put together to make sure that we don't have another outbreak that we cannot control? No, we got, Mano River, everybody doing their own little thing. Wahoo went dormant after the Ebola. So nobody has to do, but the West has developed vaccines that are being tried now in Africa. That's a funny part of it.
Thank you.
Somebody from America is testing Ebola medicine in Africa.
Yeah.
But we don't do anything about it.
Look, I have one quick
Let me read you the statistics before you come in with your. They said.
That's fine. I have a question for the doc. That's all.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
So the question, Amara touched on something briefly, and I thought it was very interesting because I just happened by coincidence to be reading about that this week. So it has to do with he mentioned aid and how, for the aid, the loans and all that stuff that we get from foreign entities. But then they bring in the expatriates and all of that. So there's a study that's from back in 2015 that said the annual deficit is about 41.3 billion. So whatever we get, we lose 41.3 billion in terms of what they get, what the outside world gets. So, I'm sure you've heard about those kind of figures. That kind of behooves the point that we, at the end of the day, we have to figure out a way to rely on ourselves. But I just want to hear, your thoughts about that. That's all.
No, I think aid is not, aid doesn't work. I was I represented President Sirleaf on the UN team that developed the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. And I remember one of our meetings in Abuja, that was in Addis Ababa, we said, no, we have to stop emphasizing aid because it doesn't serve Africa. In fact, those days, the figure was like $50 billion deficit for Africa. And now it's going, probably more or less is going up. But Aid does not work. Nobody develop a country on aid. It has never happened. Nobody sit down and say, give me, a colleague from Amara from Freetown said, the aid we receive will not do anything. Of course, we're talking about 20 million. The Africans are talking about $500 billion to patch up the economic downturn. And that's the number that people are throwing. What are we getting now? 1 billion here, 500 million here, 350 million, 20 billion dollar maximum. And they also, they never, and those things never answer our structural problems.
Right. And Amara, you are right there.
Issues that we don't solve, and we're trying to use Band-Aid to resolve crises.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a small crisis,
Right.
and then we go from small to small. We don't do anything.
Right.
We don't deal with a structural issue. We don't deal with infrastructure.
Amara, you are right there in Sierra Leone going to school. You are a student. So this thing affects you directly. Let me read the stats and you give me your opinion. In sub-Saharan Africa, close to 90% of students do not have access to household computers and 80% are not able to get online. School closures have left over 330 million learners of all levels and over 8.5 million teachers unable to learn or teach from home. Amara, you are one of those in the statistics. From Sierra Leone, where you are, how the students, because like for instance, when war happened in Liberia, there was a gap. So with this prolonged closure of schools and the students are not learning, by the time you go back to school, you even forget what you learned before the closure. What is the impact there, directly, because you are there as a student?
Thank you very much. I think I am in my final year. I'm reading a degree program in social science. And that is the worst thing that we are suffering here. It is very unfortunate and quite amazing that most students in Africa are not even used to computer. Reason being, they do not have access to getting it. And when this coronavirus came in, the entire educational system have been shut up and nobody is attending. You have found out that because we are adult planners, we may have one or two domestic issues to concentrate on. At least if you have a computer or any other internet service that you might be engaged with. But unfortunately, most students can even develop computer phobia. They may be afraid of the computer because they have no access to getting engaged into this computer. And ironically, you may visit some of these colleges, they will tell you that this is a computer lab. You enter there, all of these computers are rusty, damaged, they are no longer in use. And when you get there, you may not be able to use it. So as long as the COVID-19 have created or has attacked our countries and the education system have stopped, I think our learning activities have all stopped. And at the end of the day, most of the students, they even tend to forget what they may be learning in those various institutions. So the impact is so negative to understand that everybody is just grumbling and they want to get back to school. But the government, on the other hand, may not give us the green light to go to school, because in case the thing take a very toll on our lives, we may end up to face a situation like what used to happen into Ecuador. Even the poorest health facility that we have here, they are barely enough to accommodate huge amount of patients. So if the government can make stringent measures on us and allow us not to attend the various educational institutions, when this coronavirus take a deep toll like what is happening in South Africa. South Africa is a better economy compared to most of African, or especially sub-Saharan Africa. That is why today you are seeing they may be having around nearly 100,000, around 80 or 90,000 people infected over there, but they are really trying to ensure that most of those people will get admitted. But if it comes in places like Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Guinea, patients may even be lying down on the street. They may have no area to attend. So that is why when the education system have stopped, the impact is very negative because no learning is taking place. No learning is taking place at home. It's not taking, because none of us is actually, or only few amount of us may have access to computer. And even if you do, you are not even afraid to use it. And the worst of all is that the internet service here is very, very expensive. There are times you have this smartphone, you may want to use it, but the internet service that the GSM producers, they make the system so expensive to understand that when the education system, we learn here manually. So as long as it has stopped, no learning activity is taking place. So when we get back to colleges, I wonder what we may be doing over there. Most of us may have forgotten what we actually taught. And at the end of the day, we may start from the scratch. So it's very negative. We are just praying and hoping that this thing goes tomorrow.
All right, Amara, your final statement as you take leave of us.
my final statement is that we are actually praying, like you people are out there, you're actually trying in one or two ways, sensitizing us, but not everybody have access to even doing what I am doing here or listening to you people, because most of us may not have the access to internet service or computer. So what we are actually saying that at least you can make a call to you sit down, you call personalities, you discuss issues, and they give you their own perception, their opinions, their views about whatsoever thing. So if you have influence to our direct government over there, you can make a call, make a communique, write letters, articles, this, that, perhaps if they are forwarded to these people, they may take it over. Because Africa per se, if our electronic or in terms of technology is not really developed, at the end of the day, we may just be relying on Europe. And if we rely on Europe or the Americas or the Western world, they may definitely not help us. Otherwise, they will come is to exploit us. Africa is suffering. But I think we need to take development on the other stage. The other stage is like, let us try to invent, or let us try to develop the technological aspect of Africa. Because if technology is developed, we may have rice, we may have all of these things that we are fighting. But unfortunately, Africa up to now, there is no technological development. All of us are just relying on even the type of book that we are taking that is learning here. We are just too bookish to understand that there is no technology or there is no technical learning into our institutions. Most of those institutions are so bookish. All of them are purely academic, and we really need a what? Like when you watch at China is developed today not because most of them are highly educated, but it's because they are improving technology. So whereas Pakistan, though they may not be a highly developed country, but they are better than us. Think about China, about India. So I think you people need to be advising our African government, let them actually try to develop the technological aspect of our education. So if we are okay with these things, we can definitely see what to do. But for now, definitely, as long as the learning has stopped in colleges, everything have just come to a standstill because none of us is being okay to getting information. There are certain good students in colleges, they even hardly know how to get access to information on the net because they are not used to these things. So it's really appalling. You can be a degree or PhD holder in Africa, yet you are computer literate. I wonder how you do your learning. That is why we don't have secret here. When you want to write a CV, you must meet somebody because you are not computer literate. So all of these things, it is really, really appalling.
Thank you so much, Mr. Amara, and good to see you again.
Welcome.
Edward,
I hope to.
Edward Amara joining us from Freetown, Sierra Leone. He is our West African correspondent. Mr. Amara, thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Next time. Good night.
Pleasure meeting you, Camara.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Doc.
Nice
Good night.
Good night.
Yeah.
So we go into politics, the impact on politics, and the role politics play in all this COVID-19 pandemic. And to lead that, I go to my political man, Mr. Sears.
Mr. Jack, thank you. And we again want to welcome those who are following us here at Focus on Liberia. We are discussing the impact of COVID-19 on Africa. Let's come to the politics of COVID-19. The political side of COVID-19 can be discussed without measures put into place by most of the African leaders or governments and the enforcement thereof. And we want to look at that and see how those measures have been helping in minimizing the infection rate of COVID-19 across the globe. There are many measures they put into place. Some people give stimulus, lockdown across the board, and again, enforcing these lockdowns is one thing that many people have serious concern about. All across Africa, there are videos around police or law enforcement people chasing citizens down and beating them. We have similar measures in the West. We didn't see people being chased around. So why does it have to be Africa? And let's start with you, Dr. DeShield.
The answer to your question, I don't think it has to be Africa. I don't think it should be that way. I think those are excesses. I think that it's kind of intuitive to put into place those kind of to take. It's one thing to have a lockdown, but I don't think that should be used as a premise to, basically engage in human rights, what amounts to human rights abusive. It's excessiveness. I mean, you can still get the population to abide by the health order and the lockdowns and the stay at home as best as you can. I don't ever believe that is in the best interest to essentially brutalize people just to get them to abide by that. I think in the end it could backfire if we insist on doing that. I think you remember the case of the Ebola, the gentleman, the kid that ended up dying, right, losing his life. I think everybody remembers that case.
Yeah,
That's an extreme. That's the kind of stuff that can happen if you take it to the extreme. So we have to be very careful. I mean, we recognize the need to have to stay at home and to minimize the spread of the virus. But like with everything in life, it's a balance. You have to at the same time be very vigilant to make sure people don't get harmed. You don't want to end up. You're supposed to be protecting people, and you know that the reason why they're out there is because of the sort of the way our economy is. They simply don't have the luxury of just staying at home. So if they're out there, yes, they should be at home, but the reality of life makes people to go out there. So what do? Do you brutalize that person, or do you just try to, sort of get him to go home? I think they have the police and army or what have you, those in charge of law enforcement, they have to do so with that in mind. It's out of necessity that people are in the streets trying to survive. I don't think,
And before I get to Dr. Dukule, Dr. DeShield, trust, obedience come to mind. In Africa, we are known for being obedient to the older ones and also to authority. But ironically, when it comes to government, when government issue an order, you say it's out of necessity people doing this thing. Is that what it actually is? Is it not the issue of they not trusting the authority or telling the truth?
Mr. Sid, I think, honestly, there's always a case where it's going to be a mixed baggage, right? There's always people, it's a mixed baggage. And and I know there will be a subsection of population that simply will just refuse to follow those things. We see that here though, right? We see that in America. It's not unique to Africa, right? I think you noticed the last weekend where I live, in not the city, but for example, in Toronto.
Right.
Thousands of people just decided to ignore the stay. They're going to the beach. It's Memorial Day in the States. Completely ignore everything. They're just, as if nothing, right? So I don't think the idea of people, violating or, deciding that they're going to ignore stay-at-home orders, I don't think that's unique to Africa. That's all I'm saying. I don't think that's unique to Africa. It's happening all over the world. People are doing that. They're just rebelling. They're tired. Some of it is not out of necessity. Some of it I think is. In Africa, we, like you said, our economies, a lot of people, it will be interesting to see how many people can actually work from home and sustain themselves in Africa. I would imagine that number is pretty low. Most people have to go out physically to earn a living. So, I think a lot of people are going out of necessity. There will be others too that just refusing to follow and they're tired staying at home. They want to go out. They're tired being indoors. And we have those same attitudes even in the West. That's all I'm saying. And like you said, they don't go around in the West dragging people in the street and doing all that. So why do we do that to our people? I mean, it's the same. You won't see them brutalizing people on the beach because they want to celebrate Memorial Day and they're tired of COVID-19. They might give them a ticket or fine them, but that's like a civil penalties, not like where you try to, grab somebody and drag him back or do all that. That's what I'm saying.
Where's the market? Now, I think when there was this time when there was high alert on terrorism, there were some leaders who would, target their political opponents and call them terrorists. So when COVID-19 happened too, we see that there are some governments or some political leaders who will, use lockdown, emergency, or quarantine, and all those as some measures. Okay, we see that.
Yep.
We also see that elections are going to be canceled or postponed, or people are going to use whatever means to have some political leverage and advantage. Dr. Du, how is that playing out in some of these African countries? You are on mute, if you can unmute yourself.
Yeah.
You're on mute.
Yeah, unmute yourself.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you. What we really need to look at is not, the police brutality in the streets. Those things are very bad. Nobody condone them, and they should not happen. It shouldn't happen in Africa at all. Nowhere police should be arresting people because they went out. You probably help them to get to where they want to go. But the bigger thing that you need to look at is laws and constitutional changes and issues about elections that are going on the continent quietly being, I'll give you an example. I mean, not that I really mind the guy, but an Ivorian opposition leader who was trying to run for president was accused of embezzlement, and he was not even in the country. He was tried and sentenced to 20 years in jail in 2 hours. He was not in the country. Yeah. But it happened when the country was locked down. Nobody went to court. The one witness government had did not show up, and her lawyer didn't show up. So those things, little things like that happen. Constitutional rights, human rights, violation that happen that you may not see today because it's happening in the back while you are sitting here talking, but we're worrying, everybody's locked down. They create new laws that can be passed, just like our budget, Liberia budget. I saw one of the senators on complaining today, say, we told plenary, say we're going to do this, but they say, oh, because of COVID-19, we have to speed it up. So they pass it. And a lot of things will happen like that. And we will not see it today, but a year from now, you say, when did it happen? They say, well, you know what? When we were staying home, these are the new laws that we passed, or these are the new amendments to the process that we passed. And that's happening a lot. That's the things that worries me. Not the police brutality. I think you can deal with those things. Police brutality, you can say, okay, stay home after 3 o'clock. It doesn't make sense because if you go out at 9 o'clock, the virus doesn't stay home. Mm-hmm. And also, somebody asked a question about government, trusting the government. In Africa, when you have a poor country, poor continent, people are so poor, desolate. Any government is better than the one you have. So that erodes your confidence in the government. So we don't trust our government because they're not good. And we have a mentality that any government is better than the one we have because things are so bad all the time that things don't seem to ever change. But political, I worry about the bigger little things that happen in the dark, not the police brutality, although that is condemnable, but I worry about, the little things that they change in the corridors of power that you don't know of, you don't see it coming until it's happening. Or borrowing money. Now we're talking about aid. A lot of countries will be borrowing money in the next year or so. They're not paying debt. Maybe they're not servicing their debt till October, August, September, they said. But they'll be borrowing money to make up certain things. How do they borrow those funds? Where do they get it from? Is it going to be in China? Is it going to be the IMF, the World Bank? How much? What's the interest rate? And all of these things, government will do it to run their own campaign without you knowing it, using your money to run, because you will pay that money 10 years from now. So that's what I worry about.
Yeah, I think it's also the question of, where when so many capital is going to be hard to come by, that it's even more necessary for people to remain vigilant. You're going to see, concession agreements potentially passed because, we need money. That's going to be you're going to hear that over and over. So it's even more important to scrutinize all of those, any kind of deal and that's supposed to go to, because the terms of those loans, more than likely right now, it's going to be very, very predatory.
Oh yeah.
Very, very predatory. If you think about it right now, it's the predators, they reign supreme because they can just say, you take it or leave it. That's going to be, and then the people are going to be taking loans normally they try to do those sort of things. Just imagine in a pandemic situation where the governments have lost significant revenue and they're needing, they're behind the 8 ball and they're needing money. So there comes, you got to be very, very watchful for predatory loans and the terms under which you're going to sign those loans. And is the Congress, the House and the Senate, are they really, this is the time for them to be even more vigilant, to insist on slowing things down. But at the same time, if they try to slow things down, you will also get the accusation against them that they're holding things up. People are catching hell, and these guys are trying to slow things down. We need the money. We need the money. Sign, sign, sign. There's going to be a rush to sign away everything. So I think that's a big danger.
I mean, there's a business side to COVID-19. There's a business economic side to it. A lot of people are making a lot of money out of it. As you say, yes. Vendors, predators, pharmaceuticals, and all of it, everybody is going to. Yeah. And what Africa is doing, that's the problem. There was a program the last week, I think it was 2 weeks ago, WHO organized a conference sort of between African inventors, but they had people on the phone talk for 2 hours and they said, okay, we'll call you back in six months. But it's not going anywhere. So Africa has to take its own thing. This is serious. It's not going to end now. It's going to go on. At next year, we're going to have another crisis. And after that, we have another crisis and we have another crisis. And, before you go on, I think we need to also, when you talk about predatory loans and stuff, that we have to look at where that money comes from.
Yeah.
Where that money comes from, and that keeps the continent totally dependent at all times. Because it's the same people. Either you go to the IMF World Bank or you go to China and it's, a little middleman. China got a lot of money. They don't give it to you directly. They give it to a company that loan you the money because you cannot fight that company in the international court. You can go cry to them and say, oh, please. They say, no, we are a Chinese company, but we don't respond to the Chinese government. But it's the Chinese government money. We have to fight. You're talking about being vigilant. We have to look at how much money China is going to put into Africa in terms of loans after this pandemic, because they have free hand to give money. But at what condition?
Yeah, I've seen those. I'm sure you heard of the cases in Zaire, I think, where the police stations and airports have been taken over and ran because they defaulted on the loans. So, those are
the Chinese issue is serious. Chinese and our money issue is very serious. People would think, oh yeah,
Gentlemen, accountability has been an issue already for most African countries, transparency as well. And now we have emergency situation on hands. Should we be more worried? We look back at the Ebola era in Liberia today. Reports show that the Ebola money was not handled properly. But everybody was concerned about safety, and that was an opportunity for bad guys, to pocket some of this money. We face the same situation again. So should we be worried that this piece of history will be repeated?
Absolutely, it will be repeated.
Yeah.
I'll just give you an example. I remember I went to a conference on Ebola. We went to Accra, and after the meeting, I followed Dr. Emmanuel Dolo. We went together, and then we returned. He wanted to brief the president because I was in a meeting. He said, why don't you come with me? And then the president happened to have called the Minister of Health. She came in with her team to say, what's the state of Ebola? They gave up, they made a big presentation with PowerPoint and all. The president said, I just want to know what we got, where is it, and who got what. The minister said, we don't know, Madam President. She said, plainly, it was after that, Madam said, she had to cover for her workers. She came and she said, oh, well, this was pandemic and people were dying, we didn't account for everything. But that was bad. The minister, she said, yeah, things came by cargo airplane. We just took them to the stadium. The stadium was full. SKD was full of cars and ambulances. From a country that had only 3 ambulances, we have more than 160. Now we don't know where they are. Nobody knows where they're going. But the minister failed. What did we get? Did we have an account of what we got, what DSC is holding, and what you got from? She said, no, madam, we have no clue.
Can you imagine that? And Mr. Jack, the reason I asked this question, most African countries now are getting money from WHO, United Nations, all the United Nations branches, and even the donor countries are giving money. And the urgency you see from the leader is that we got to get this money to get the PPE, to get the doctor's pay. And in that rush, some money go into the wrong hands. And no one is asking the question because everybody is focused on, how the people get the help they need. So where are we going?
Yeah, it still boils down to infrastructure. And we have some comments on Facebook. And also, I just want us to just squeeze in one last segment on the social issues or the social system before we close down the broadcast. Looking at our crime rate during this pandemic, just as Sonny said, because people are focused on the pandemic, the bad guys are going to slip in. Our prison system, are we going to let people go because, it's time to focus on the pandemic? Who's going to take care of people in jail having COVID-19? So let's just let them go. People are going to take advantage because things are hard. So drug trafficking, you talk about prostitution, child molestation, people are selling people are taking advantage because you have the money. But before we talk about those social issues, let me read a few comments on Facebook. Dave Jassy, I think we need to begin to ask the question, why is Africa poor? Why do many of the brains of Africa reside outside of Africa? How can we change the narrative? We may need another revolution. I hope that's not like 19.
Or no, maybe you're talking about the Bernie Sanders kind of revolution. Or the brokers on changing mind, changing attitude, I think.
Well, I think we need a revolution, definitely. Africa has been, if you remember my article, where I said, we went from the founding fathers who came with the revolutionary ideas of independence, and then we had the generals and the sergeant and who came in totally power drunk, but nothing else, from Mobutu to Samuel Doe, that whole clique. And then you had a generation of technocrats who were supposed to be what you call managers, and they're the worst. And that means that Africa is still stranded somewhere from independence to trying to find its own way. In the 60s, it was Houphouët-Boigny, this and that, and then they talking about independence, they talk about communism, but they had no clue what it was. The general didn't have any idea. And the technocrat who came in, the managers, they don't have money because they came to the countries that were broke. And why the countries are broke? Mismanagement. Mismanagement and bad governance. That's it. Mismanagement and bad governance are why Africa is broke. It's nothing else. Can it change? Yes, if there's a revolution. I believe in a revolution. I think Africa should have a new revolution that will change the focus from everybody else and focus on Africa.
What kind of revolution that, if I squeeze that one in, what kind of revolution you think we need?
A revolution is a mental thing. A revolution is a change of mind, changing people's mind. How does a whole country, a poor country like Burkina Faso, spend $100,000 to build a statue for somebody who died in 1984, Thomas Sankara? He inspired them. The continent needs people who can inspire people. We don't have that. We don't have anybody on the continent now who can inspire people and say, well, this is the African that I want to be like. Mandela gone. Kagame is there, but he's an autocrat. So who do we have? Look at it. I mean, they're all technocrats who came from the World Bank, Africa Development Bank, this and that, but they don't have any ideology. They don't have anything to push people, to inspire the population, except, yeah, we're going to build a new bridge. We're going to build a new airport. That's not development. That's not development.
Mr. Jai, you're an IT guy. What kind of revolution we need? Your brother Dave Jai is talking about revolution, and do we need technological revolution?
Just change, as Dr. Duke has said. Change. Okay. There should be a paradigm shift. The way we look at things, like take Liberia for instance. The way we look at governance. Now we have a certain group called political leaders. Even political parties, the way we think about governance, it's just one person. Then if you go into the national government, it's like same old, same old. So there is no drive to change anything. It's business as usual. So is that revolution. But with the time is fast spent, I just want us to talk on the social issues. The social system should be our last thing before we close the broadcast. You know, what has the impact been? You know, crimes and the way we deal with these kind of things. You know, is it a decadence? Is it a breakdown that we see now? What does it look like?
Mr. Jai, if I can jump in, we all know socially, Africa has been vulnerable. And now we have a pandemic of this magnitude on our hands. That is not important anymore. Everybody is concentrating, how do we get past this pandemic? At a time we didn't have something this life-threatening. Children were getting raped, and we have the reports to back it up. And some of those cases will just be swept under the rug. And everybody now is concerned about food as a result of the lockdown. And so if there's a crime committed next door, maybe that neighbor is even thinking about food at that moment and may not be concerned about that crime that has been committed.
So now, at this point now, who takes care of the vulnerable population? Yesterday, you had an interview with the albino community, people like that, okay?
Right.
Who take care of the people that were already being preyed on? Now you have a pandemic, you have lockdown, you have even people that are going to pay people to do bad stuff. Where are we with that one? Let's Dr. DeShield come in.
I'm sorry, could you repeat your question? I got
yes, this whole social problems that we already have. We talk about the rape cases, you talk about crimes,
yes.
Prison system. We're talking about doing drugs, drug trafficking, and people are, you know, human trafficking, all taking place. Now people are in lockdown. There's a pandemic that suck all the energy and take our focus. What's happening now in Africa, and what has the impact of this pandemic been when it comes to those social problems?
Yeah, I think, you know, like Mr. Sia said, you know, it has the propensity to exacerbate those things. You know, it's like, just like we were saying, it's kind of like a predator's world out here. And now these people that, you know, prey on human frailties and this sort of stuff, they can just go crazy doing those things. So I think, again, like with everything in life, we cannot, just like I think someone said earlier, we still have to live. Even if you have a pandemic, we have to insist on still, you know, policing. And you know, it's like they have a saying here, you have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. I don't think we can, we have to first we have to recognize that all of those things you speak of, they're very likely to get exacerbated, because the predators know that's not what you're focused on right now, right? So they're more likely to engage in those things. So the government has to all the governments, they have to double down. They have to have, you know, prosecutors and law enforcement people that are, you know, more vigilant about that and keeping and those things. You journalists also, you know, you have a big role to play, because you have to keep highlighting that even if in the midst of pandemic, crime is still occurring. I mean, the children are still vulnerable. So we can't just all focus on just the pandemic and forget about that, you know, those kind of social ills and stuff. So I think that highlighting it and bringing it into the forefront, you know, we have a gender ministry. We have a lot of those administrative things in place, but sometimes we don't do enough job holding their feet to the fire, right? We have lawmakers. The citizens can, you know, directly appeal to those lawmakers to make sure that they keep these things in the forefront. So those are the kind of citizens advocating for these things, the journalists, keeping the issues in the forefront. Those are things that are extremely important right now. So I think that, you know, the people are counting on folks like you and, you know, the healthcare people, social workers, to bring these things to the forefront.
Dr. Du?
Yeah, well, on the social issue, I mean, social problems, they will be there. I know there was an uptick in domestic violence at one point. Somebody has released, you know, in the first 2 weeks, I guess people now got to use the idea, okay, I got to be in the house with that person. So But domestic violence, was on the uptick at the beginning. But I think that was people were not used to the confinement. Crime will go on, but I think the biggest crime that will happen really is from government controls. That is potentially the most dangerous thing that will happen. They could do a lot of things in the dark, and then stay home. People will stay home. That probably, I'm not sure, but I think that lessens crime. If everybody's staying home under curfew, I think there's less crime. If less people are traveling from country to country, drug trafficking, human trafficking, all of those things, at least will stop for a while because you don't have anywhere to go. You could sit in place. But it doesn't mean any of the problems that we see now is being resolved. They're all piling up and coming back to bite us after the pandemic.
And
government, finance, everything else is going to come up. It's going to come back to bite us.
And that is setting the stage for our next topic, which is post-COVID Africa. What do we, if we look into that, at the time all this is said and done, probably our economies have all collapsed, GDP dropped, debt to GDP ratio is through the roof, and health system is intact. The students prolonged staying out of school. Some of them have abandoned school. They have gone to the villages now to work. So if we look through after the whole COVID-19 thing, what do we expect to see? That will be our next discussion this Sunday.
Next Sunday.
Focus on Liberia. Mr. Sie.
Thank you, Mr. Jad. And you heard Mr. Jad that what he just stated will be our next topic next Sunday. I believe that is next Sunday.
Yeah.
And not this Sunday. So next Sunday we'll be here to discuss post-COVID-19, the impacts it has or it will have on Africa. That's what we will be discussing, and we will love you to join us during that time. On that note, gentlemen, we have exhausted the topic. We want to say thank you. We will get 1 minute concluding statement or closing statement from each of you. Then we will wrap it up. So let's start with the senior man in the room, Dr. Duke. How you want to leave our people? What you want to leave with us?
Well, I think what I want to leave with you, I mean, there are a few things that I really want to point out. One is this chloroquine thing. Why is it that the world let Africa use chloroquine for decades? And now that they're talking about using it in Europe and America, they say, no, it's bad for you. That's one thing I want to leave people to think about. And people are doing research. Like, Doc, you are in research. Why not? What's wrong with chloroquine? Why nobody told Africa that chloroquine was bad till it came to use it for European countries? And then the issue also, where will Africa stand after this thing? Where is Africa going to go? Is it going to be the same system of trying to deal with emergencies every day and not putting any structural changes in place? Or are we going to say, okay, you know what? We can't always go to Paris for dental work. We can't always go to New York for a checkup. We need doctors. You need doctors, you need universities. You need universities, you need material to run university. You need medical centers. You need, how can you run, do you call something a medical school when you don't have a microscope? Yeah. So all these things are linked. So I think if one thing we have learned that we have to wake up. Either you call it a revolution or evolution, not evolution anymore. You have to wake up and have our own narrative in all these issues. And I hope we'll talk about that next week, because we are entering a Cold War and Africa has to play its own role. What is it going to be?
Dr. Du, thank you, Dr. Du, for that closing statement. Surely what you just left with us is very impactful. Let's come to you, Dr. DeShield. You heard that closing statement there. The chloroquine, we have used it for so long, but now some people recommended that it might be able to help. The Westerners are saying, no, this thing is not good. What comes to your mind, and then what you had to share?
Sure. So let me address that first. So in the bigger, I will get to it, but in the bigger picture, I think the main thing, the theme here for me is we need to prioritize health, our healthcare system. We need to prioritize the development of our own drugs, We need to make our own drugs, make our own medical devices. It's being done in Senegal. I'm sure you probably read some stories about that.
Yeah,
We can do this stuff. We can do it. It's a matter of prioritizing. So we need to prioritize those things. There's things, they have in the West and even in the Senegal and other parts of it, they have incubators where, we need to prioritize entrepreneurs that want to start biotech companies with the help of the government. They need money. We have people that we put people through that get chemistry, biology degrees, they get masters, they come back, some of them start working at the finance ministry. How does that happen? I mean, why does that happen? Because we need to enable and empower these people. If individuals can start biotech companies, surely countries can start biotech companies. We're not talking about, there's ways you can go about it. There's no need to reinvent those wheels. The countries need to get involved with public-private partnering to start their own biotech drug manufacturing companies. We need to also enable clinical research. To do clinical research, you have to put in place the regulatory structures, because if people get hurt from testing those drugs, you know how that goes. We need to make sure that the drugs are safe and efficacious. So that gets to the issue of the chloroquine. The issue of the chloroquine is that it's what would be known as, it's a drug that's being used for malaria, lupus, and that sort of stuff. The issue is, though, those are different indications. So when you use a drug to treat one indication, and now you want to switch to a different indication, health indication, completely different, the dosage is going to be an issue. You have to establish a safe dosage. So the same dosage that worked to treat malaria, it's not necessarily going to be the same to treat COVID-19. Sometimes it can be, you can have overlap of the doses. People do this all the time. They can use an old drug to treat a new indication, but it has to be done through vigorous clinical trial research. I mean, let's put it this way, Doc. If it was a French company, bringing that hydrochloroquine to us, some people will probably be like, hey, let's watch them closely. Why are they bringing this drug? So I think it's a matter of, we should do the same, even if it's something that we've been using it, sure, but we've been using it safely for malaria. The dosage could be different. Anytime you treat a different disease, the dosage could require 3 to 5 times more dosage, and it could kill the virus, but then it could harm you because the dosage is too high. So you have to establish that. You have to establish the safety of of the hydrochloroquine for the treatment of this COVID-19. They're doing some of that. They're collecting data. Right now, any doctor you can still use, it's in America and anywhere in the world, you can use hydrochloroquine. The doctors have the right to use it to treat their patients. They don't stop medical practitioners from prescribing and using drugs, but the drug companies can't market the hydrochloroquine for the treatment of COVID-19 in these Western countries. That's a whole different story. They can't market it because it hasn't been approved for that specific indication. But your doctor practicing medicine can absolutely use hydrochloroquine. Even in Africa, they can use it right now. But they have to do so safely because they don't know what dosage is effective. That's the problem. If you give too much, you can trigger irregular heartbeat, heart attacks. That's some of the concerns that they've been seeing. So I think it's a matter of, I think you got to take that into context. But again, that's why it would be good if we didn't have to always rely on other people to test these drugs. Like you said, technology, it belongs to everybody. Same thing with drugs. Once a drug becomes off patent, so hydrochloroquine is off patent, that means anybody can make it and use it. You don't need permission from anybody, right? It's an old drug. Most drugs are on patent for about 20 years. After the 20 years, anybody can use hydrochloroquine for any purpose they want. So, but we don't make it. We need to learn. If we were making it ourselves, we would make it, test it, and make sure it's safe at a safe dosage and that it works also. So that's why we need to develop our own, testing and that sort of stuff. So we can make sure that these drugs are safe, and we can also provide employment for our, chemists, biologists that are studying at the universities, and sometimes they end up working out of their fields. You know, like I said, work at the finance ministry, but the person has a master's in chemistry. He went to China, studied chemistry, came back, and now he's working at the finance ministry because.
Or you run for district number 15 somewhere.
Yes, exactly.
Well, maybe that person is texting the chemical composition of the money at the finance ministry or something. All right, ladies and gentlemen, on that note, this is how we'll come to the end of our broadcast. As always here, we want to say thank you for following our broadcast and to remind you to always like our Facebook page so you can get notification when we are live. And also our YouTube channel, subscribe to it. We upload all our shows there, you know, for you to be able to have the opportunity to listen. Thank you. I'm Anthony Mr. Jad.
On behalf of all of us here at Focus on Liberia, I want to say thank you for watching. Thanks to our guests for coming. Remember, COVID-19 is real, so keep it safe there. Until then.
Thank you. Thank you. Nice meeting you guys.
That's the message we always want to leave with you.
That's all we want.